What's up YouTube, Capital G here, checking out the brand new TCG exclusive Noble Knight cards coming out in Soul Fusion. I talked about this in yesterday's video about this booster set, but I think it's really interesting that Konami is kind of double dipping here and going back to Noble Knights as an archetype. What I think is going on here, I think Konami R&D and the TCG were never fully satisfied with the level of competitiveness that Noble Knights achieved. Off the top of my head, I believe that they have like 2 regional top 8s, at least over here in the United States. I think Asian Persuasion actually has one of them, but they were never on the level of like Burning Abyss or Cosmo. Those are decks that won YCSs. You know, Cosmo got to multiple finals even when like Pendulums were really big, and Noble Knights have always been, I don't know, maybe roguish tier 3 at their best. So it's a deck that definitely has a lot of work, but I will say we got 4 cards to talk about, and 3 of them I think are absolute magnificent cards. I think the 4th one is a good card potentially, but it's kind of like player preference. Feels a little slow. So let's go ahead and break down the first monster. This is Noble Knight Ivane. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce it. It's like Ivy and Vane. So Ivane, I'm not sure. Anyways, it's a level 4 light warrior monster. Effect, of course, 1700 attack and 1600 defense. Stat line is good, and you know, of course, it's a Rota target. It says if a Noble Arms equipped spell becomes equipped to this card, you can special summon 1 Noble Knight token. That token is a level 1. Excuse me, it's a level 4 warrior light, 1000 attack, 1000 defense. Wow, that token's actually pretty good stats for a token. Also, you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of this turn except Noble Knight monsters. You can only use this effect as a hard once per turn. Okay, fair enough. It says while this card is equipped with a Noble Arms equipped spell, all other Noble Knight monsters you control gain 500 attack. Okay, so I actually love this card, and it's for a very simple reason. Way back during Zexal when Noble Knights first came out, and really in the Arc V, you know, the core, I guess, play style of Noble Knights was to get to the Exceed monsters as quick as possible, but we all know that the best Noble Knight ever is Isolde, and it's by a large, wide margin. But I think the game plan now is not really to go straight into the Exceeds, it's to get to Isolde, because Isolde will get you into the Exceeds, and you'll make a bunch of advantage while you're doing it. This card is basically an instant way of going into Isolde. You just normal summon it, you equip one of your Noble Arms, and then boom, you get that token. There's your Isolde play, and from there you can just kind of start doing what you want. I like this card because it's a play starter, and all it requires is a Noble Arms card, and you should generally open with a Noble Arms card. So I kind of like this because it doesn't require 2 monsters. It can kind of make the plays by itself. I think that this is a solid card. Seems like maybe a 1 or a 2 of. I feel like 2 is a really good number. Next, we have a hand trap Noble Knight, which is really interesting. This is Morgan, the Enchantress of Avalon. It's a level 3 dark spellcaster, 1300 attack, 1600 defense. When your opponent activates a card or effect while you control a Noble Knight monster and a Noble Arms equipped spell, this is a quick effect. You can send this card from your hand to the graveyard, destroy 1 Noble Arms equipped spell you control, and if you do negate the activation, you can only use this effect as a hard once per turn. Okay. So basically, this reminds me a whole lot of Subterror Fiendus, and I still think Subterror Fiendus is a ridiculous card. In fact, I put Subterror Fiendus in my top 10 broken Yu-Gi-Oh cards in terrible archetypes. You could probably say Isolde is that, you know, for Noble Knights, but I think that this card is magnificent, and really, I feel like just the creation of this card tackles one of the biggest problems Noble Knights have always had, and a problem that they were going to have moving forward, no matter how much support that they get, and it's actually a problem that Crystal Beast as an archetype had too. When you play an archetype like Noble Knights or Crystal Beast, well, really when Konami designs those archetypes where your back row is always going to be filled with, you know, a whole bunch of fucking equips or a whole bunch of Crystal Beast monsters, you can't really play traps reliably, because if you're playing traps, then that's less room for you to have your other cards, your arms or your Crystal Beast monsters in your back row. And you know, the more of those you have, the more powerful you are. That's why this deck needed something like a hand trap. It needed a hand trap, something that doesn't have to be activated in a spell or trap zone, but that can basically stop what your opponent's trying to do, that can help you push through your opponent's back row, that can just kind of answer whatever the hell you want it to. Now, there is one big problem with this card, because honestly, I looked at this card and I thought this is exactly what the deck needs, and it's fantastic. 3 of. The big problem with Morgan is the fact that it is not a warrior, and I don't know if Konami just went, boneheaded. It was a boneheaded mistake, or if this was intentional, but this card 100% should have been a warrior, and the reason is, if you would go into Isode, this would be the perfect card to search off Isode, then you can make your Exceed plays later, and you'd have a perfect counter to whatever your opponent's best play is during their turn. You'd be able to use Morgan at that point. I think Konami didn't want you getting this off of Isode, and that's the only reason that it's a spellcaster. But if this would have been a warrior, it would have been like 100% bona fide 3 of. Maybe it still is. I know a good card when I see it, and having an Infernity barrier that you can activate from your hand, plus when you destroy your Noble Arms cards, I mean, they just re-equip themselves anyway, so who really cares? You're not losing out on any advantage. This is the type of card that the deck needed, in my opinion. Next up, we have a Rota for the archetype. Actually, it's not even a Rota. It's like a Rota on steroids times 10 plus crack is involved. This is Heritage of the Chalice. It's a normal spell card. It says add 1 Noble Knight monster or Noble Arms card from your deck or graveyard to your hand. My God. Oh, but it gets better, by the way. It says if your Noble Knight monster equipped with a Noble Arms equipped spell is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard while this card is in your graveyard, you can add this card to your hand. This is a hard once per turn. You can only use, Heritage of the Chalice effect once per turn, and only once that turn. Holy moly, this is ridiculous of a card. First off, on its core, like on its face value, it is a Rota. It searches all your Noble Knights, but then it also searches your Noble Arms cards too, if you need like an equip to get your deck rolling, or if there's one certain equip that you need. So it's always going to be a 1-for-1, but then it lets you add from the graveyard too. So basically, it's a warrior returning alive and a Rota built into one card. But then on top of that, you can potentially just put it back in your hand if one of your Noble Knights dies. Like, that's crazy. Now, you can only use each effect, well, I believe you can only use one of the effects during a turn, but the thing is, if you're using the second effect, if you're using the add back to your hand effect during your opponent's turn, which is much more likely, then it really won't matter because you're going to use the search or the add effect during your turn. I think that this card is absolutely bananas. This seems like a 100% 3 of. I mean, as long as you don't open with multiple copies, I don't see any reason why this card would ever be dead. And even if it does get sent to the graveyard, I mean, you could even set it technically as a bluff. I know Noble Knights don't want to do that because I just talked about how they want to have their back row with Noble Arms cards. But even if this card got like discarded from your hand, again, you can kind of add it back to your hand from the graveyard. You just have to make sure that it doesn't get banished. This is one of the best cards that Noble Knights have gotten in a very, very long time. I actually think that this is one of the best Rota variations that we've seen in years. And then lastly, we have their Trap card. As soon as I saw a Trap card, I was immediately just kind of apprehensive. I was like, Traps and Noble Knights? I don't know about that. Anyways, it's until Noble Arms are needed once again. This kind of feels like, based on the name of the card, like maybe it's going to be the last support card for Noble Knights for a while at least. I know that a lot of us thought that Isode was going to be the last support card for a while, but then Konami was like, nope, we're going back to Noble Knights. This is a normal trap card. It says excavate from the top of your deck equal to the number of, excavate cards from the top of your deck equal to the number of Noble Arms equipped cards you control, and if you do, add one of them to your hand. Also place the remaining cards on top of your deck in any order. You can banish this card from the graveyard except the turn that it was sent there. Special summon from your deck one Noble Knight monster with a different name from cards you control, or in your graveyard you can only use this effect of until Noble Arms are needed once again per turn. Okay, so this card has a decently high ceiling. I mean, if you just look at it at face value, it can technically be a +1 because you activated the first time. Maybe you got a Noble Knight on field with like 3 equips, you excavate top 3 cards of your deck, you say I'm gonna go ahead and take that Ash Blossom. During your next turn, you banish from your graveyard, you summon another Noble Knight monster from your deck. Boom, you got 2 cards out of 1 card. The problem is it's just really slow in my opinion, and I don't think that traps naturally work all that well with Noble Knights, especially considering it's a trap that doesn't stop anything your opponent's going to do. I mean, I get it, if you use it off of boars, then it's kind of like broken because getting 3 of them in the graveyard immediately, like that's pretty sick. You know, you're setting yourself up to do all types of crazy plays. The problem is that really only feels like it's going to be awesome off of boards. Now, if you could send this to the graveyard off he's sold, that would be awesome, but as far as I know, Sold only sends equip cards to the graveyard. Overall, I just don't think that this card is really needed. I mean, I think that if you draw it and you're going second, I mean, you're talking about not really being able to get that monster until, you know, a couple of turns down the duel or down the line. And even if that monster does come out, I mean, who's to say that you're even in a position where you're even or you're winning at that point? Maybe that monster doesn't even do much, and then you really have to run a high monster count because you can't summon a monster that's in your graveyard or on your field. Now, I think it's likely that you won't really have that many monsters on field. Usually Noble Knights consolidate their monsters into Xyz or into Link monsters. That's fine. But monsters in your graveyard, that could be a little bit of a problem. Overall, I just don't like this card much because it's a trap, honestly. I just don't think traps are needed in Noble Knights. The only type of trap that archetypes like this need are basically Infernity Barriers and Solemn Judgments. You need cards that just blanket answer all, like anything your opponent can throw at you, and they just got an Infernity Barrier, but it's a hand trap, so it's just a much better card because you can use that card immediately. You can use that card the turn that you draw it. This card, you can't. And also, again, this card can't be used the turn that you send it to the graveyard, which makes it even slower than slow. So you guys let me know what you think of the new Noble Knight support. I think that 3 of the cards are definitely going to go in the main deck, and it'll be really interesting to see if Noble Knights can get some of those regional top 8s. You know, YCS top 8, we'll wait on that, but I think Konami's definitely moving this deck in the right direction. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching. As always, subscribe if you have not already. Turn on that notification bell for daily videos.